Millions of people are about to hit play on June 12th. Netflix is dropping a highly polished retelling of a gruesome 2020 murder. Viewers will get the timeline, the forensic evidence, and the inevitable arrest. But the credits usually roll right after the guilty verdict. In reality, a conviction does not end the story. It triggers a decades-long legal marathon for the people left behind. The entire chain of events started with a deception. Taylor Parker spent months wearing a prosthetic baby bump, convincing her boyfriend and her small Texas town that she was pregnant, simply to stop him from leaving her. As her fake due date closed in, she needed a child to produce. Investigators later recovered her devices and found her search history filled with deliberate queries on fetal abduction. On October 9, 2020, Parker went to the home of 21-year-old Reagan Simmons-Hancock. She attacked Reagan and used a scalpel to take her unborn baby, Braxlynn, directly from her womb.
Shortly after fleeing the scene, Parker was pulled over by a state trooper. She claimed she had just given birth in her vehicle. The story fell apart. She was arrested, and the infant in the car did not survive. Handcuffs stopped the immediate physical violence, but the arrest set into motion a massive legal apparatus that true crime media rarely sticks around to document. 2 years later, the state of Texas brought Parker to trial in Bowie County. The prosecution laid out an overwhelming volume of proof. They linked her internet searches to the physical scalpel recovered, detailing months of calculated deception documented on her own social media. Securing the capital murder conviction was straightforward, but the sentencing phase alone consumed 25 days and required testimony from 142 separate witnesses. This enormous expenditure of time and human energy was necessary to answer the heaviest question a jury can face: whether the state should take Taylor Parker's life for what she did. A death sentence in Texas triggers an automatic appeal, moving the battle out of the local courthouse to the state's highest criminal court. Parker's legal team submitted a massive document outlining 25 specific points of error, demanding the conviction and the death sentence be completely overturned. One argument stood out. Her appellate attorney claimed that prosecutors deliberately introduced humiliating evidence about Parker's physical appearance during the trial. The defense argued this alleged fat-shaming was a calculated move to manipulate the jury, intentionally prejudicing them by trivializing Parker's life as a capital defendant. On November 7, 2025, the court rejected all 25 arguments and upheld the death sentence. But a confirmed sentence on paper carries a very different reality in practice. Taylor Parker sits inside the Patrick L. O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, with no scheduled execution date. State appeals are exhausted, but federal proceedings come next. This thorough system means the timeline from sentence to execution routinely spans decades. The numbers reflect this delay. In 2025, the exact same number of Texas death row inmates died naturally in custody as were actually executed by the state. For Parker and many others, the wait itself has effectively become the punishment. When we focus entirely on the mechanics of the trial and the appeals, we lose sight of the people forced to live through the fallout. Braxlynn Sage was a person with a name, fully 8 months developed, and only 60 days from her natural birth. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter was inside the house during the attack. Today, she is an 8-year-old growing up in the permanent absence of her mother. Then there is Wade Griffin, the boyfriend whose potential departure motivated the initial lie. He faced no criminal charges, but he is left holding the moral weight of unwittingly catalyzing a murder simply by threatening to leave a relationship. The legal system processes these individuals as witnesses or peripheral details, yet they are the ones serving a sentence that will last the rest of their lives. We can watch a true crime documentary, turn off the television, and simply walk away. The surviving family cannot do the same. Reagan's sister Emily stated publicly that Parker had been such a massive burden that she could not even think about her sister without feeling the heavy weight of the woman who killed her. The court's decision in November 2025 to uphold the conviction finally gave Reagan's mother and sister a definitive legal answer, but closure is complicated in a capital case. While Taylor Parker waits indefinitely in Gatesville, true finality remains entirely out of reach for the people she left behind.
She faked a pregnancy for months, used a prosthetic bump, posted on social media, told her boyfriend they were expecting.
She faked a pregnancy for months.
But as her fake due date approached, she realized she needed a real baby.
She used a prosthetic bump every single day to sell the lie to everyone around her. She researched fetal abduction online. She selected a target, a 21-year-old mother in the exact same small Texas town, 8 months pregnant.
She went to her home with a scalpel. A 3-year-old child was in the house.
Netflix drops a documentary about this case on June 12th. They're going to cover the crime, the trial, the verdict, but here is what they will not cover. What happened to every single appeal, including the one that argued prosecutors fat-shamed her to get a death sentence? What Taylor Parker's life actually looks like on death row right now, with no execution date set? What happened to Reagan's family in the years since October 2020? And the 8-year-old girl who was 3 years old when her mother was murdered in her home. That child is growing up. Nobody covered that. This is Afterfall, and today we're jumping into a full explainer on the case of Taylor Parker.
All right, Section 1. Who was Reagan Simmons-Hancock? Reagan Michelle Simmons-Hancock was just 21 years old. She lived in New Boston, Texas, a small town of just a few thousand people tucked away in the far northeast corner of the state. She was married, she was already raising a 3-year-old daughter, and she was 8 months pregnant with a second little girl that she had already named Braxlynn Sage.
Now, here's the thing you really need to understand. Reagan was not a random target. Parker had selected her specifically. They actually knew each other. Back in 2019, Taylor Parker was hired to photograph Reagan's engagement and her wedding. So this crime was not impulsive. It was meticulously planned by someone who had literally been there to capture the happiest days of her victim's life.
Moving on to Section 2, the lie and deception.
So how did this all start? Well, months prior, Parker believed her boyfriend, Wade Griffin, was going to leave her. And to keep him around, she decided to fake a pregnancy. She actually went out and bought a prosthetic baby bump. She posted constant updates online. But here's the catch, right? A fake pregnancy has a very real deadline. As that completely fabricated due date got closer and closer, she basically backed herself into a corner of her own making.
And this is where things take a truly dark turn. Investigators later dug into her devices and found an absolutely chilling search history. Fetal abduction. She was deliberately researching the premeditated act of killing a pregnant woman specifically to steal her unborn child. She studied past cases, she acquired a scalpel, and she chose Reagan.
Which brings us to Section 3, the murder and traffic stop.
On October 9, 2020, Parker went into Reagan's home and brutally attacked her, beating, stabbing, strangling her. And then, while Reagan was literally dying, Parker used that scalpel to cut Braxlynn Sage from her womb, and she took the baby. And remember, Reagan's 3-year-old daughter was inside the house while this entire nightmare was happening. She was left alive. Shortly after fleeing the scene, Parker actually gets pulled over by a state trooper. She tries to claim she had just given birth right there in her car. But the trooper immediately notices the infant is in severe medical distress. The story just completely fell apart instantly. Parker was arrested on the spot, investigators rushed to Reagan's home, and the horrific reality was uncovered. And tragically, baby Braxlynn Sage did not survive.
Let's look at the legal fallout in Section 4, trial, conviction, and appeals.
142. That is the staggering number of witnesses called to testify against Parker in Bowie County. The prosecution had an absolutely overwhelming mountain of physical evidence. They had her digital footprint, the scalpel, months of fake social media posts, the whole shebang. And then there's this number, 25. The sentencing phase of this trial alone dragged on for an extraordinary 25 days. A jury had to sit there for almost a month just to decide the ultimate punishment. And at the end of those grueling 25 days, they handed down a death sentence. Now, you might be wondering about the appeals. The defense's main argument was pretty wild. They claimed prosecutors unfairly used humiliating evidence about Parker's physical weight to prejudicially manipulate the jury into basically fat-shaming her into a death sentence. But the highest criminal court in Texas wasn't having it. In November 2025, they systematically rejected all 25 points of the appeal, finding zero reversible error, and upheld the death sentence in full. So where is she now? Today, Parker is sitting on death row at the Patrick L. O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas. Her state appeals are totally exhausted, though federal habeas corpus appeals are likely up next, and those can take years. Honestly, like a lot of inmates in a system where actual executions are declining, she's basically facing a de facto sentence of just waiting. As of May 2026, there's absolutely no execution date set.
This leads us to Section 5,
the victims left behind.
It's so important we remember the people at the center of this. Unborn Braxlynn Sage was a named victim, legally counted in that capital murder conviction, yet she rarely gets the individual attention she deserves. And then there is Reagan's surviving daughter. She was only 3 years old during that terrifying attack in her own home. That child is growing up. Today she's an 8-year-old girl having to navigate life without her mom.
The toll this has taken on the family is just unimaginable. Reagan's sister, Emily, really captured their agonizing journey. When the appeals were finally rejected, she said she was overwhelmed with happiness that it was over. She literally said Parker had been such a massive weight in their lives that she couldn't even think about her sister without that dark shadow looming over everything.
And finally, we kind of have to talk about Wade Griffin. He's the man who believed the lie. He was the boyfriend whose potential departure is what motivated Parker's horrific chain of deception in the first place. Now, legally speaking, he faced 0 charges. He was entirely a victim of her lies, and by all accounts, he was absolutely horrified to learn what Parker had actually done.
But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really complex question to think about. Wade Griffin was legally cleared, completely innocent of the crime itself. But in the broader, messy human story of all this, what moral responsibility, if any, lies with the man whose potential departure sparked the lie? It's something to ponder. Thanks for walking through this explainer with me today and keeping the focus on the reality beyond the headlines.